Good evening, everyone. Welcome. I'm excited I get to talk shop with an author, not just any author, but Mike Cobb has graciously returned to the show, which I am so genuinely excited about. You can see my cheekbones very prominent, but I do love to talk to authors. I've become quite a fan of Mike. So in the past, oh, I don't know, let me see here because I keep notes on all my books. Since August of 2004, I've now read three fairly healthy books of his, and that is Dead Beckoning. This takes place in Atlanta in 1895, around the time of, let me see if I can get this right here. It was a big, you know what? I'm drawing a blank because I'm reading Devil in the White City, which I'm going to ask Mike if he knows that book, but a World's Fair kinds of thing. And I apologize to him that I'm blanking on that because since that time, I've also read this, The Devil You Know, which is excellent. 1960s, 1980s Atlanta. Mike is from Atlanta, and we'll talk tonight a little bit about, or maybe a lot about, why his work is so Atlanta centered. I'd love to know about the makeup, the fascination with Atlanta. And then I read this. You Will Know Me by My Deeds, which is a sequel, and it really folds in the book here touches on it, but this book really focuses a lot. It's some of it's fiction, some of it's fact. So we're going to talk about that line because it's fascinating, and it's a trend in Mike's books. But the Atlanta child murders, and there's always the man who was tried and went to prison for those crimes. There's always been some questions about it. So Mike and I are going to do a bit of a true crime thing, and I'm going to fully give him the reins on that because he's done a lot of research on this. He'll bring us up to date. It comes in there. They're constantly opening the reopening the case. They're doing new things with DNA, so on and so forth. 23 children. If you saw the promotional banner that I shared, 23 children, because the two adults and 20-something children, some very, very young. And Michael kind of give us a bit of an overview on that. It's fascinating in this book how he folded in the reports, because the victims in these cases and serial killer cases, which are so fascinating to people, and I'll ask Mike about that, why he thinks that serial killer cases. I'm reading The Ultimate Evil now about the Son of Sam, and have just read just about every serial killer book there is, the work of John Douglas and all of that, who I believe, and again, we'll check with Mike, but I believe that John Douglas, the famous seminal FBI profiler, was involved, chimed in on this case. So we'll talk about that as well. But I want to tell you, I'm very proud and very honored. As you can see, there's an endorsement here from me on the back of the book, which is cool. And I love that Mike Cobb's Atlanta-based historical fiction easily holds its place on the bookshelf next to Caleb Carr's alienist novels. And I have really taken up the torch to promote Mike's work. So I did a video too. And I also said, I said Ken Follett in that, Pillars of the Earth and so on and so forth, a real gift for taking large amounts of research and turning them into fiction. But I'm going on and on. We want to talk to the man himself, and I will let you know, it's not out yet, but this kind of thing has its perks. I'm reading a novella that he's written called Muzzle the Black Dog. I'm about a quarter of the way into it, and boy, it's good. So let's do the opening. While the opening is playing, I'll check in with the chat room. I see several messages there. Go under media assets, they call it now, and play the opening of the show. I'm really glad you're with me. I hope everyone's warm. I know our friends in Philadelphia, our friends in New Jersey, cold, icy conditions, and also flooding in West Virginia. Some of our friends. So a lot going on weather-wise.
There exists a realm beyond our wildest dreams, a realm beyond reality that the gatekeepers and guardians have always told us consists of nothing but tricks of the eye, weather balloons, swamp gas, sand cranes, fairy tale myths of monsters, crackpot conspiracy theories, and desperate cries for attention.
We know this realm exists, and it's just beyond the horizon, the preset path, the well-worn walkways where the cynics want us to stay.
Instead, give this a listen. Put on your headphones, adjust your volume, close your eyes, and fasten your mental seatbelts, because the twilight-tinged turnoff from reality's alluring highway is looming just ahead.
We're about to leave the plane of the easily explained, the couldn't possibly be's, and the no way I just saw what I saw's, for the spaces and places where everything is possible, and if you stay long enough, even probable. We're about to take a journey into the outer realms.
All right, so Mike keeps his bio succinct, which I truly, deeply admire. So let's read that and bring him on screen, Sal, because I have way more questions than I thought I was going to. Mike Cobb's body of literary work includes both fiction and nonfiction, short form and long form, as well as articles and blogs. While he is comfortable playing across a broad range of topics, much of his focus is on true crime, crime fiction, and historical fiction. Rigorous research is foundational to his writing. He gets that honestly, having spent much of his professional career as a scientist. He vehemently refuses to box his work into a specific genre, and he splits his time between Atlanta and Blue Ridge. I'll let him tell you where he is tonight. But let's go on and introduce the man. Mike, I went on and on. I couldn't help it.
Well, thank you so much, Joey. It's so great to be on with you again.
Thank you. We had a great time the first time, and I had asked you for a bunch of questions, and we very methodically went through the process and all of that, and we got a great response to that episode. So tonight we can pick up some new things. So third novel. Now you have written, that's pretty substantial. So bravo, and I've read this since August, plus a quarter of your novella, and I'm happy when I'm reading your work, I have to say.
Well, I will tell you, I have joked with people and I've said that I didn't know how to write short books, but now I'm writing this novella, and it's much shorter, and I'm grateful for that, because I mean I love writing long books because I really get into the research and all the detail, but it was sort of refreshing to be able to write a shorter piece.
Well,
For once.
let's say that, Edgar Allan Poe, who I greatly admire, he said that a novel is a cannon and a short story is a rifle, which is really good. So where does having written a novella now, where does that fall for you in that metaphor?
Oh gosh, that's a good question. I guess I don't know. I mean, it's certainly not in the metaphor. I guess it's certainly not a cannon. I guess it's maybe a semi-automatic rifle. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I will tell you though, I've many writers have said in the past that in some ways it's more difficult to write a short piece and get the message across than it is to write a long piece.
Yeah, well, Mark
and
Twain,
honestly,
sorry.
I'll tell you this, Joey. I mean, when I set out to write whatever it is, I let my characters write the story for me, and I don't set out to write a 400-something page book. I don't set out to write a novella. Whatever it turns out is what turns out. I did not know for sure that Muzzle the Black Dog was going to end up being a novella. But when I reached the point where my characters had said everything they needed to be said, I was through with it.
I
you know?
love and admire that so much because, as you know, I'm a crazy researcher like you are, but then I do so much outlining.
Mhm.
Um, I'm a big fan of the 3-act model and the hero's journey. It works for me. Um, I find it very dangerous when authors say, "Oh, you don't need any of that. Just like have
Right.
at it." I think it takes a unique kind of, I'll use the word genius, to do that and for them to turn out as well as yours do, because some books just end. But
Yeah.
there is a beauty and a completion and a symmetry to your work.
Well, I appreciate that. You know, in the writing industry, the common terms are pantser and plotter.
Yeah.
You know, pantsers are people who sort of like write by the seat of their pants, which is not really true because I mean I've told you before my characters mean everything to me and my books are very character centric.
Yeah.
I don't storyboard the books ahead of time. And then there are plotters who plot everything out from the get-go. And I'm very much a pantser, not a plotter. It's just the way I write. I mean, everybody has a different writing style.
Yeah, and don't change it
Yeah.
because it works for you, and that's the only thing that matters. I have found a way that within the outline, there is still plenty of air. There's still plenty of space for my characters to, and maybe being a writer, being a director, writing in, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 different genres like I do, screen and
Mhm.
stage and page and all. I'm very comfortable with the characters, yet there's a distrust in me as a writer that if I let them go too crazy without a room, without a playground, without a bit of a maze, that they're going to take me over.
Well,
Um,
they might. And it might surprise you, you know, they might hold you hostage.
Yeah, they do. Sometimes they do. They say we're not stopping until, and you've probably been there. Like, I have things to do. We don't care. Like, you put us in a place we don't want to spend time in until you come back to us.
Right.
Which if you remember, um your publicist got caught up in something because I was reading, it was the PDF version at the time, but I was reading "You Will Know Me by My Deeds," and I was trying to get it done before it came out, and you left me the characters too on such a cliffhanger that I wrote to you and I said, "Mike, what have you done to me? So and so is here doing this." And the next morning I wake up to it, your publicist was on the thread and she goes, "What? What has happened? Oh my God, like, is everybody all right?" And I thought that was beautiful. What was your response to that?
Well, I mean, I love I don't like, I don't like tying things up with a nice bow,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know? I like leaving things hanging. I like challenging the reader to wonder, "Oh my gosh, you know, what happens next? What's going on here?" I like that. I like reading those kinds of books, and I like writing those kinds of books. Yeah.
Now, now, as I said in your bio, the research and the mega amounts of data, crunching data and all that, then turning it into a beautiful book, like I say in my video endorsement, is a real talent that you have. How does that, scientists do, unless I'm misunderstanding, scientists do tend to like to tie things up with a bow to come to some definitive answers. Is this your chance to play sort of against that scientist archetype, or how does that work?
Well, it's interesting that you say that because, yes, I was trained as a scientist, spent much of my career as a scientist. Scientists are always, in my view, testing their assumptions,
Yeah.
questioning their assumptions, um, looking for the next thing. So it's yeah, in a sense, you're deriving answers from your work, but you always want the answers that you derive to elicit even more questions. You're always you're always it's more, to me, the scientific endeavor is more about questioning than finding answers.
There you go.
And the other thing is to be a scientist, you have to have a robust curiosity, and I think to be a writer, as you know, you have to have a robust curiosity. So those two things sort of go hand in hand. Yeah.
Excellent, excellent. Good scientists, I think, operate that way, and there's a whole plethora, there's a whole spectrum, but we'll leave it
Yeah.
at that. But so you're doing an incredible amount of social media. You're doing videos, doing different clips. I think this past weekend or coming up, you're part of a virtual book conference kind of thing.
Actually, I just got back from an in-person
Oh,
weekend long conference in Alabama. The first day was in Birmingham. It's called Murder in the Magic City. Birmingham's nickname is the Magic City. So it was a wonderful conference with 4 panels of authors. It is very much a reader-centric conference, not a writer-centric conference. That was great. It was great because I got to interact with a lot of readers, but I also got to interact a lot with fellow readers whom I love. And then the second day, we went down to a little town just outside of Montgomery, Alabama, and they have something that they do every year called Murder on the Menu. And I did the same thing there. Yeah, so I just got back from that late Sunday night. It was great. And
awesome.
I love doing things like that. It's great fun.
And so
Yeah.
many authors, and we have a lot of authors in the audience. So when I have writers on, I try to do some things for them to learn. Social media is painful for most of us. I mean, and a really successful writer farms all of that out. They don't deal with that, or most of them don't. Some do. Stephen King has a pretty good in-person presence because he's so opinionated about everything, right? How are you finding that aspect of it, the marketing and the social push?
Right. I'm sorry, you dropped off briefly. I have to
Oh,
apologize. I think I'm having some internet or some connectivity problems on my end, but I think you were asking about my promotion and social media and things like that. Is that correct?
yeah. Are you enjoying it? Because you're doing quite a bit of it.
I am. I will tell you. As you know, I love research. I love writing. I love interacting face to face with people and talking about not only my books, but the things they are reading and talking to other writers about the things they're writing. I guess I'm of a certain age that social media doesn't necessarily come naturally to me.
Mhm.
I'm doing a lot of it, and I have a wonderful young woman who helps me with that, and for that I am grateful.
Mhm.
But I'll just be honest with you, Joey. It's not something that I wake up every morning and say, "Oh, great, I'm going to get to do social media today."
Right.
That is not what turns me on. But I do it.
I hear you, and I do it every day, and it's I won't call it an evil, but it's a necessary thing. It's a necessary
Yes.
thing, especially in this day and age,
Yes.
because there aren't big marketing teams that are lining up, and and authors have tried all kinds of things. Now you are doing a virtual book tour. I did notice that.
I
Give the
am.
audience some info on that.
Yeah, so I'm doing a tour. It's actually the second tour that I have done with a woman named Gina Hott, Hott, and she's absolutely wonderful. It's called the Partners in Crime virtual book tour. I did the book tour for The Devil You Knew. I'm right in the middle of a book tour for You Will Know Me by My Deeds, and I actually have a book tour scheduled for Muzzle the Black Dog, which I believe is slated to start around May 15th, May 12th, I think, whatever that Monday is. She
Okay.
always starts her tours on Monday, and they last about a month. And so I'm really excited about that. for those writers who happen to write in the crime or mystery genre, Gina Hatt's wonderful. I highly recommend her.
Great. And how do
The
those
other
work?
thing that how
How
do
do
they
those
work?
work, Mike? Like,
So
can anybody
basically,
participate, or watch them, or how do they work?
anybody can participate. Anybody can watch them. So it basically, I have book giveaways. So people, I also have a bunch of people who sign up with Gina, read the book, and review the book for me.
That's-
Then I have the giveaway program, and then in conjunction with the book tour, I do several interviews, podcasts, and things like that. It is as if you were doing a face-to-face book tour and touring across the country, if you will, promoting your book. It's a similar sort of thing. Anybody can participate in it. I think the website is PIC Tours. Let me just check here, and I'll tell you what it is. I think it's
Okay,
PIC
yeah.
Tours.
I was on there the other
Um,
day because another
.com.
another colleague of mine is doing it.
Excellent. Yeah. Yeah. I will find it in a minute, and I'm not pulling it up
Okay,
very
I'm
successfully
gonna
right now,
hold
but
the
it's quite
yeah.
good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
Um,
folks, just search Partners in Crime Virtual Book Tour, and you'll find it.
yes.
Okay.
Yes. I will tell you as well, and I don't want to get ahead of you in terms of what you want to talk about, but I for those writers who are on the call, I will tell you that I have a wonderful publicist um, named Dia Shandira. She's in LA, and I highly recommend her. She has just been great for me, and we did a big press release that is generating a lot of interest nationwide, and so that's part of my overall promotion strategy, if you will.
And I have been working with Dia, I think over 4 years now, on this end of using podcasts and
Yeah.
book reviews to, yeah, so Dia is wonderful. So let's get into the new book. Now we talked about the first 2 books, I believe the first time that you were on. So You Will Know Me by My Deeds runs a parallel track, with crossovers through the main characters. So it is a sequel.
Yes.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's a sequel within weeks of the first book.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Billy Tarwater and his wife, now they're grown up, they're adults, they've suffered all this trauma, especially his wife Cynthia.
Mhm.
Yes. Yes. Um, and it runs a parallel track. Billy is a journalist. He works for a big paper in Atlanta, and he's also looking at, it's the time of the trial for the Atlanta child murders. So we're gonna save and get into those in a factual way because you've uncovered a lot of stuff and handle a lot of material. Um, you tend to work with this fiction facts track, right? This historical fiction track.
Mhm.
What is the appeal of that to you?
Oh gosh, well, so to me, it combines my, and we can talk about the crime element later because there's a very specific reason why I'm sort of obsessed with writing about crime. But the way I write, so basically, I weave a compelling, sort of like page turner fictional story, if you will, on top of a solid foundation of factual history.
Yeah.
I love, and we can talk about what that means in the context of this book. What I love about that is it allows me to combine my love of history with my passion for weaving a compelling story. And so I write that story, I weave in um, a true story, and I weave the two together and just sort of make them work together. I mean, it's to me, that's where the magic is, if you will.
Yeah, you create a
I could
lot of
easily have
magic.
written a story about the Atlanta crime murders.
Right.
Well, thank you. You know, I could have written a story about the Atlanta child murders. I could have written the story about Billy and Cynthia and their life after The Devil You Knew, but it's weaving the two things together that I think that's what makes it really powerful, if that makes sense.
Oh, it absolutely doesn't, and that is really your true gift, and where the Caleb Carr comes in. And now I'm also a historical fiction writer, you know, so with the pirates and all, and we're not here to talk about me tonight. We're here to talk about you. But I feel that an audience is more inclined to take the journey and go along. There are some historians, and I love their books, right? I mentioned his name is Eric something, who wrote Devil in the White City about the Columbia
Eric
World's
Larson.
Fair in Chicago. Yeah. And I now have all his
Yes.
books on my Amazon list, and I'm going to go through them one by one. Guys like Sebastian Younger. I mean, there are guys. But for a mere mortal like myself, I give the audience a lot of history and a lot of education, and get to play with theme. And it's more digestible to them, because I have written 6 nonfiction books as well on various subjects. So do you feel that, or do you not, or do you think much about educating an audience or moving them to some kind of action, or to be changed by the end of the book? Do you think much about that kind of thing?
I do, but I have to mention one thing, Joey, quickly, if you don't mind.
Please.
You mentioned Sebastian Younger. That is so funny, because literally 3 hours ago, I was listening to a Sebastian Younger podcast about near-death experiences.
Wow.
And it's so funny that you mentioned him. What a coincidence. Anyway, yeah. So I to write and publish historical fiction. I want to
Mike, we're losing you.
you can hear that. Okay. And perhaps in some cases, I want to sort of catalyze them to action. Let's take the Atlanta child murders, for example. I know you want to talk about that in a little more detail later, but I will just say now,
Yeah.
I am convinced, based upon all the research that I did, that Wayne Williams, the individual who was convicted of killing 2 adults, he wasn't convicted of killing any of the children,
Oh, right. Sorry
is
about
serving
that.
time in prison right now. I am convinced that he did not kill all of the children. I would love nothing more than, well, I shouldn't say nothing more. I want my book to inspire and entertain readers, but I would love for my book to maybe spark some interest on the part of people in positions of responsibility to truly take another look at that case. Keisha Lance Bottoms, the mayor, just before the current mayor of Atlanta, decided to reopen the case and do additional DNA evidence because she was convinced, or at least maybe she wasn't convinced, but she had at least some doubt about Wayne Williams' guilt. She reopened the case, but nothing has become of it since. I've gotten some press on a local TV station in Atlanta, and I would love for that to happen. I would love for people to come forward because of my book and say, yeah, maybe there's something here. I think we should look into this.
It
That would be
was
great.
It was compelling, and so I do want to take some time. I just want to take a little step backward. Well, I guess too, in my own defense, no one was ever tried for the murders of the 21 children, and in the court of
No.
public opinion and amongst law enforcement and the judiciary system, a lot of people say he did it. So he
Correct.
might as well have been convicted. Yeah.
Correct. But some of the parents of the victims did not think he had done it.
Yeah. Mike, I want to talk about a theme, and then I want to talk about your inspiration because it goes in, and then we'll dovetail. And I'm not going to rush through this, but we are having some conductivity problems.
And
So
I'm
the
so
most
sorry for
important
that.
thing is that, oh no, you can't control it. We can't. We've all
Yeah.
gone through it. We've all gone
Yeah.
through it. And sometimes the audience can't watch the show because they're having,
Sure.
bandwidth problems. So yeah, so that first question um is, I can feel a passion. And I said in my review of They Will Know Me by My Deeds that I felt like I hope something more comes of this. Like I felt that
Mhm.
impulse.
Mhm.
I felt that, and it didn't take away from the experience at all. So there was no dogma, there was no agenda. So rest easy on that. But you do have a some skin in the game with this, because you have a theme of corrupt police officers, of mistaken people going to jail, sometimes because of conditions of racism, or like I said,
Yeah.
I'm reading The Ultimate Evil. Um, David Berkowitz being the likely committer of all of those murders and attempted murders seems
Mhm.
very unlikely when you read the police transcripts. And the so where does it come from? As much as you want to talk about and you're comfortable, where does this drive come from for your work?
Yeah, so just before I address that, let me say this. That theme does run through my books, but I will tell you that I am I want to be careful in that I don't accuse the police of anything. Much of the factual parts of "You Will Know Me by My Deeds," in addition to this, the whys and wherefores of the Atlanta child murders, that event itself, much of the information that it provides the gist, if you will, for my theory that's or my postulation, if you will, that's outlined in the book, is the result of work that other journalists did that certainly alleged
Mhm.
that there was a police cover-up. Um, I don't want to get so dogmatic that I say yes, that was the case. I hope that I ask enough questions. I hope that I elicit enough interest in sort of pursuing it to so that ultimately, the authorities can get to the bottom of it. But I don't ever want to be guilty of drawing solid conclusions. But all of my books, yes, reflect at least some degree of questioning the actions of the police. Now, in terms of why I am so interested in all of this, yeah, I will tell you, and I think Joey, you and I have talked about this before. Um, so I love history. I always have. So that comes naturally to me. I love writing. I always have. So that comes naturally to me. The obvious next question is why crime? Why do I write about crime? And why do I write about possible alleged police corruption? And it has everything, I believe, to do with something that happened to me when I was 17 years old. When I was 17, I'm a native of Atlanta. That's why I write a lot about Atlanta. When I was 17, I was this kid, trying to figure a lot of stuff out, as many 17-year-olds do. And I was at an inflection point in my life, and this woman 6 years my elder came along. She was introduced to me by a family member. Um, she took me under her wing at a time when I really needed that kind of not role model so much, but an older figure that I could look up to and that could help sort of move me forward, if you will, in my own life journey. Um, she meant a lot to me, and in 1970, she was basically she was murdered execution style Her body was found, nude body, bullet-riddled body was found in on a construction site in Atlanta. It obviously had a profound effect or impact on me, to the extent that for a while, I don't know whether you and I talked about this before, Joey, but in a while after her murder, I sort of went off the deep end for a while, but then finally reined myself back in and moved on with my life. But without going into a lot of detail, because I am writing her story, after Muzzle the Black Dog, that is my next endeavor, and it will probably take me 9 to 12 months to complete it. So my plan is, after Muzzle the Black Dog is published in mid-April, I'm going to be heads down for a while working on her story. But without going into great detail, I will tell you that there were a couple of suspects. Two suspects are still alive. One of them was named in several affidavits that were signed by people who knew Susan. That was her name. Although in the fictionalized work that I'm doing, her name is Kathleen. This individual, he was a married man. She was having an affair with him. He is named in 2 affidavits. His family and one of the top 3 homicide detectives were very, very close, to the extent that they would have done anything for each other. Shortly after her murder, except for the bullets, which were diverted off to the ballistics lab, all of the evidence went missing. I have been working with a private investigator for several years. Her name is Katie Carter. We have the entire police file. We have all the crime scene photos. We've met with the Atlanta police. We've had communications with the GBI, the State Crime Lab, the Fulton County, which is the county that she was killed in, the Fulton County District Attorney. We have been told that in a cold case like this, evidence just doesn't go missing, but it went missing.
Right.
Also, this married man who was named in the affidavits, there is no indication in the police file that they ever brought him in for questioning. So either they brought him in and the file was that was expunged from the file, or they never brought him in. But again, his family was very, very tight with the with, as I said, one of the top 3 homicide detectives. So yeah, look, I'm not accusing anybody of anything, but
Right.
That's what that experience is what set me on the course of writing about crime and also questioning every step of the way the actions of police.
Yeah. Yeah. And thank you for sharing that. Condolences to you, because that's a very heavy thing. And as I won't say confided, but as I let you know, and as many of our audience members know, because Tanya is a very gifted medium, we've had 2 similar experiences, shockingly similar, that we've assisted on. Same thing, where the accused has very high connections in the halls of power, and this is a very real thing. I also too want to pick up on your correction of me and say Dead Beckoning takes place, a long time ago, 1895, and remind the audience, because I brain tooted on this. It takes place during what major event in Atlanta?
So there was a World's Fair of sorts in 1895 called the Cotton States and International Exposition. It really was a World's Fair. There were exhibitions from Europe and from all over South America and Mexico. After the Civil War, there was a major push to conduct these expositions. There had been one big one in New Orleans a few years before, to conduct these these World's Fairs or these expositions in order to reinvigorate the Southern economy, which had been devastated after the Civil War. You mentioned Eric Larson's Devil in the White City earlier, which centers largely on the Chicago World's Fair, which occurred just 2 years prior to the Cotton States Exposition in Atlanta.
That's right.
There are parallels, I think. Eric Larson writes nonfiction, but sort of in a fictional style. There are parallels between that story, Devil in the White City, I think, and Dead Beckoning.
Yeah, because you have H.H. Muggett, right? The murder house.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. I loved writing that book. I spent years researching it before I put pen to paper, so to speak. And I actually came upon the story. So the gist of the story is a prominent businessman was on his way to work one morning and was gunned down. And the story is all about the efforts to find his killer. But again, I mentioned earlier, I like to weave a page turner, sort of build a page turner, if you will, a fictional page turner on top of a true story. So it's a cold case to this day, although they didn't call them cold cases back then. I took that story and I fictionalized it. But I actually started out spending hours and hours at a research library here in Atlanta researching the Cotton States Exposition because I was actually going to write a book about that.
Oh, wow.
And I was going through newspaper articles about the exposition leading up to it. And I saw this front page article about this guy who had been executed. And I was fascinated by it. And I started reading more and more. And I started going, forward, and proceeding forward. And I realized at some point, oh my gosh, this is an unsolved murder. The main suspect disappeared. I was able to find him because in the 21st century, I have access to research tools, including census reports from surrounding counties and states that were not accessible in 1895.
Yeah. Nice.
So I stumbled upon that story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there were more compared to the two ones that take place in the 20th century. There were more gaps in the story, right? Because it was much older, and I would assume that was a good starter kit for you to practice that filling in the gaps, because there seems to be less of that in the other two books.
I think that's true. Yeah, that is definitely true. I had to fill in a lot of gaps because the information is just not there. But I will tell you, a lot of what is in that first book is factual. I mean, I studied the key members of the police force in great detail, and the victim and his family and the key suspects and the court trials and all of that. Much of that is factual.
I mean, you go from, and one of the things that I very much admire you where I use names like, Caleb Carr and Ken Follett, not lightly at all, is the micro detail. So names of stores, names of streets, products, even going back to the 1800s, you named quite a few products, little tidbits, little factoids, which are just wonderful. You also do a great job, Mike, of the four pillars of society and then the classes and how they interact. Is the most fascinating thing, because I believe I did so much social justice work, and again, this hour is not about me, but the only way that you can tell an effective story, and teenagers have such a sensitive BS meter that if you start to tell them anything, they turn right off. The only way to do that is to look at all the different points of views. There's a gentleman, I know you're embarking on screenwriting. There's a gentleman from the
Yes.
world of theater named Harold Clurman, and he talked about it as a wagon wheel. So you take your theme, and then you create a character continuum, and your character continuums are terrific because they go from the halls of power down to the simplest person, the simplest working class
Mhm.
person. All and then you turn that over, not turn that over, but you match it so it's a circle, and then put the theme in the middle like the hub, and the theme is reflected in every single character. I don't know if you do that consciously and systematically, but it shows up in your books.
I think I do it partially consciously. I mean, part of it is I get so immersed in my characters that it just sort of comes naturally. I mean, there is a character in Dead Beckoning, and the police did their damnedest to pin the murder on him. He was a black guy. Um, they called him an old mudsill, which was a derogatory term back then. He was acquitted by a jury, and this is true, of 12 white men,
Yeah.
which is almost unprecedented in 1895. But he
Yeah.
clearly was innocent. He was just, an old black guy who had a propensity for the bottle, and they tried their best to pin it on him. I will tell you, just fast forwarding to the story about the woman that took me under her wing. One of the things that the police did is they trotted in several local black guys who had been, burglarized, or maybe were totally innocent of any felony. They trotted them in and did their damnedest to pin her murder on them, but they could not do it. But it
Yeah.
was like, hey, let's bring in the usual suspects and see if we can
Right.
pin the murder on the usual suspects.
Right. It is painful and eye-opening, folks, in Dead Beckoning, um, how the police take that guy apart and put words in his mouth and push him. And you pick up that theme in The Devil You Knew with a man who unfortunately goes to prison for like 2 decades. And I was
Yes.
so angry how those police, and again, that's the other thing I wanted to say. Your corrupt police either are from a very long time ago or they're your fictional creation. So the corrupt Cobb, whose son then goes on to become a police officer and somewhat redeem the family name, the way he bullies his fellow cops, and I'm not making any excuse here, but the Menendezes are in the news because of how close proximity OJ got away with it. So the LA court system was hell-bent and determined to convict somebody of something. And I think the Son of Sam was the same way. You have 5 district attorneys that are getting huge amounts of heat. You have an entire massive city in total fear. And when a guy came forward and said, yeah, I did it, they were like, okay, good. They rate all those murders, all those attempted murders. I was just reading it today. The district attorney sat for less than a half an hour with David Berkowitz, each one of them. And there were huge inconsistencies of his story. The way victims were turned, where they were sitting, which window he went in the car. And I would assume that a killer, and I've studied a lot of serial killers, those actions are burned into their brain because they're fundamental for what makes them tick. So they relive those scenes continually. So is that what you found in your work? I think this is a good segue to Atlanta child murders. Please remind me. I want to go back to Susan at the end and ask you just one question about that. But is that what you found with Wayne Williams, that there was immense pressure to?
Yes. Let me just say this, just because I want to make sure I don't give any of the viewers a mistaken notion about my view of police. I have great respect for police. I have great respect for what they do. As a matter of fact, one of the endorsers of You Will Know Me by My Deeds is a friend and fellow writer who spent his entire career as a policeman in Florida. So I have great respect for police. I happen to choose characters who are police characters who are a little quirky, not formulaic at all. And there is that theme that we've talked about that I weave through my books, but by and large, I'm very much pro police. So I just wanted to get that. I wanted to say that I have great respect for what they do.
And
yeah.
thank
So
you.
yeah. So specifically with the Wayne Williams case. So yeah. So if I'm not giving anything away because this is actually discussed in the prologue of You Will Know Me by My Deeds, but there were journalists who broke the story. One of them unfortunately has passed away, but journalists who broke the story of an informer who was implanted with a Klan group in Atlanta. And the informer was reporting back to the authorities that and again, this is all based on the work reported by these journalists. So allegedly, the reporter was reporting back to the authority that this family had of killing one black child a month to foment race riots in Atlanta. The journalists allege that when the Atlanta police and the GBI and the FBI found out about this, they killed the story. They sat on it because they were scared to death that indeed, if word got out that it was the Klan who was killing at least even some of these children, that it would indeed foment race riots in Atlanta.
Yeah.
And then when Wayne Williams was convicted of killing 2 black adults, no children, and sent off to prison, and he was convicted in the court of public opinion for killing the black kids, and there was some circumstantial evidence that he may have killed some of the black kids. Basically, the police washed their hands of it and said, we have our man. Now, admittedly, the killings stopped at that point. So, again, who knows? But I wanted to weave a compelling story around this work that these journalists did. But I wanted to build the story of Cynthia and Billy and Cynthia on top of it. So the bottom line is, and tell me if I'm getting too far ahead of us here, but picking up where the W knew left off. So Billy and somebody's out to get Cynthia in the beginning of You Will Know Me by My Deeds. Somebody's out to get her. Maybe out to get her and Billy. We don't know. They don't know whether it's related to what happened back in 1963 in the W knew, or whether it is related to the Atlanta child murders, because Billy is a journalist and he has been assigned to cover the Atlanta child murders, but on the side, against the direction of his superiors at the newspaper, he has been digging and digging and digging and meeting with this informer, digging into the story of the Klan. So they don't know whether that's somebody's out to get him related to that. They just don't know. So that's the fictional story that's woven on top of the true story. And I'll stop there because I'm probably maybe getting too far afield of what you want to talk about, but
no, it's all perfect. And I don't want to give too much away for the audience, but because it gives nothing away, and it's so core to, I think, what makes You Will Know Me by My Deeds such a relevant and important book for folks is tell them what happened to Cynthia and a little bit about the larger, because some girls were actually killed, Cynthia wasn't. So
right. So in 1963, Billy Tarwater is 11 years old. His nickname is Binky. Cynthia Tarwater is 13, then 14. She's he's infatuated with her. She's very flirtatious. She doesn't want to have anything to do with him. I mean, you can appreciate that age difference at that time in kids' lives is huge.
Yeah.
11 and 13 or 14. She doesn't want to have anything to do with him. These girls go missing. Cynthia is spared, and that happens pretty early in the book. So I guess I did give a little bit away there, but it becomes obvious if you read "You Will Know Me by My Deeds" because she's still alive. Cynthia is spared. A black guy is framed and sent to prison. Fast forward to 1980, Billy is now, and Billy is a fictional character, by the way.
Yeah.
Billy is now an up-and-coming newspaper man, and he sets out to avenge what happened to the girls, find the killer, and free this black man who was framed and sent to prison. So that's what happened to Cynthia in 63.
Right. And the only other thing that I am going to say is she was spared, yes, but spared, no.
Correct.
And it's heartbreaking, and not all victims die.
Right.
And you handle that incredibly, incredibly well.
Yeah.
What I'd like to ask you about Susan, did you know several years ago that you were going to tell her story? Were these books a form of experimentation to make sure you get that right, or at what point did Susan's story and the decision to tell it fictionally, when did that come in the timeline?
Very good questions. So I did not view these works as experimental works or foundational works leading up to my writing about Susan. I've wanted to write about her for a long time. Now, mind you, I was 17. I went on to college and graduate school, married, had a career, reared a couple of daughters. I had a lot going on in my life, so there was always sort of in the back of my mind that I wanted to write her story. It was about, I'm going to guess, maybe 5 years ago that I started working with this private investigator. So it was around that time that I said, yes, I'm going to get serious about this. I have deliberated a lot over whether I should have written her story as a nonfiction true crime work or whether I should fictionalize it. I started out hoping, and we both, the private investigator and I both started out hoping that we could solve the case because it's still a cold case. I have become less and less optimistic that that will ever happen because all the evidence is missing.
Yeah.
Many of the witnesses have since passed. And unless a third party came forward and could identify and accuse the guilty, I think it's less and less likely that we will actually solve the case. But I have always wanted I felt that I owed it to her to tell her story. Her story's never been told. I will tell you, without getting into the whys and wherefores of why this is the case, when she died, she was from Ohio, from Youngstown, Ohio. And I know you've done some work not far from there.
No, I mean, we live a half an hour away, and both our cases were, one was in 3 miles of us and one was in 15 minutes. So, but that's the same,
right around
which
there.
is chilling. Yeah.
Well, when she died, and we've talked to, our private investigators talked to one of her family members. She rated no more than a 1-column inch obituary.
Oh, wow.
Okay. I want to tell her story. The
Wow.
reason that I'm now focusing on telling her story as a work of fiction is because, as I mentioned earlier, 2 of the suspects are still alive. There are a lot of other people who are still alive who would be impacted by this one way or another
Right.
if I don't fictionalize it. And but I will tell you, I've agonized over whether to write it as a work of nonfiction or a work of fiction, even to the extent of seeking legal counsel, to get a better feel as to what I can and cannot do, what I can and cannot say, what I can and cannot write.
Right.
But you mentioned the pillars earlier. I just want to say this one thing about her story. There are overarching themes of class, of gender, of race, and of potential police malfeasance, or at the very least, negligence. And all those themes run through the story.
Mm.
She was reared in a very privileged upper middle class family in Youngstown. Her father was a physician. She was, they were members of the local country club, Catholic, devout Catholics. She led a debutante life, went to Ohio State. When she graduated from Ohio State, her sister was living down here. She didn't want to have anything to do with those trappings. She came down here. Mind you, this was 1970, and she was basically a hippie. Was living this bohemian life, didn't really want to take money from her family. I was 17. I was a hippie too. It was just that time in American history. And I am convinced, based on some of the police reports and things they said in the police reports, had she come down here and brought with her the trappings of her privileged upbringing and had led a, quote, respectable life, the police would have treated her murder differently.
Yeah.
So that's the element of class. The element of race is, I told you earlier, they trotted in several, black guys and tried to pin the murder on them. Yeah, so there's just there are a lot of themes running through this story that need to be told, and they will be told, albeit in a fictional way.
Yeah.
But anybody who ultimately reads the book will know that there's a lot of element of truth in this book.
Yeah. And I would suppose that's where the legal counsel comes in, because just fictionalizing certain things doesn't always cut it.
No.
Well, I am sorry that there was ever a need to write this book, but I also do really do look forward to it. So we've come to our hour. The internet has cooperated reasonably well. How can people buy your books and get in touch with you?
Okay, so my website is www.mikecobbwriter. That's one character string, Mike Cobb Writer. You can learn more about me, about my writing. There are also places on the pages for each book where you can buy my books through Amazon or Barnes and Noble.
Excellent.
They are available in print and ebook format. I don't have audiobooks yet, but that will be coming at some point. You can also find me on social media just by searching for me. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, BookBub, Goodreads, Not TikTok at this point, and a little bit on Twitter, but not a lot. Mainly, and LinkedIn. So mainly Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, BookBub, YouTube,
All right.
and
And I am a
Goodreads.
subscriber
Right.
of your YouTube channel.
Thank
I
you.
watch it. I watch it whenever you post anything new. So
Thank you.
thank you. I'm gonna let you go. Audience, another great conversation with Mike. I really cannot, you all know me. You know that I don't blow smoke at all. These books are excellent. If you love, especially Caleb Carr's The Alienist, start with Dead Beckoning. But all you true crime aficionados, Mike, one last thing. Am I right? John Douglas, who's the famous FBI profiler, he did chime in, and if I'm not mistaken, and this carries no weight with me either way, but he did kind of feel like there was a good case for Wayne Williams being the guy.
Yes. Yes. So John Douglas profiled the killer, and he did feel that there was a good case. And look, I believe that Wayne Williams killed some of those children. I don't think
Oh,
I think
okay.
there's enough
Okay.
circumstantial evidence. I just don't think he killed all of them. By the way, John Douglas, a little bit of trivia too. He was involved in, if you remember, those of you who are of a certain age may remember the Tylenol murders.
Yeah.
John Douglas was also a profiler in the Tylenol murders.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I highly respect his work. Folks, I didn't love it, but Mindhunter on Netflix, there were 2 seasons. I've yet to watch the second season, but Atlanta Child Murders is part of the second season
Yes.
of Mindhunters. So I
Yeah.
think I'll have to go back and watch that now, because you've piqued my curiosity about that. So many other things. Mike, it is always a pleasure. We'll of course keep in touch. And I'm reading Muzzle the Black Dog. I just got to the part where as my daughter would say, roll credits, but where there is an actual chapter called Muzzle the Dog. So
Yes.
and what happened just prior, what he finds and brings in and uncovers, was just
Yep.
stunning. That's really where I went, okay, I'm all in on I'm all in on this.
That's
So
cool. Thank you.
looking forward
Very
to it.
good.
Tanya, my lovely wife, says great show. I talk about you and your books all the time to her. So
Well,
thank you,
Joey,
Mike.
this has been an absolute pleasure.
Good. Thank you. All right. We'll talk soon, my friend.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone. We'll be back next week. We are talking about, I don't know if this is true crime or not, and we have to use the word allegedly a ton, but we're going to give you the broad strokes of Scientology, from its inception, L. Ron Hubbard's early relationship with the Antichrist superstar, Jack. Oh my gosh, Jack Parsons, who was at JPL, and it's all absolutely fascinating, right up until very recent stuff. And where, Mike, sometimes we just have to tackle these big topics. Like, you can't
That's good.
not doing this true crime stuff. So, but anyway, all right, everyone, take care, be well.